Kia ora koutou, and welcome to this webinar on the Mauri Ora Window. Ko Jess White tuku ingoa, I co-lead the Healthcare Home National Collaborative, and I'll be hosting tonight's webinar. It is great to have you along here with us tonight. I have two wonderful panelists alongside me, but before we get started, we'll begin with karakia, introductions, and whakawhanaungatanga. Karakia whakatimangatanga. Tu taua mai runga, tu taua mai e raro, tu taua mai e waho, tu taua mai e ropo. Ki tau e te Mauri tū, te Mauri ora, ki te katoa, humie, huie, tai ki e. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
As mentioned, ko Jess White tuku ingoa, ko Tararoa tuku monga, ko Rumahanga tuku awa, no whakaoriori ahau ki te awa kairangi tuku kāinga I nainei, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. So the fantastic panelists tonight I have with me is Hemaima Reihana-Tait, who's the Nurse Director for Mahi Tahi Haiora, and Ants Taboa, the Nurse Manager from 99 Medical Centre, and the Healthcare Home Nurse Lead for the Model of Care Enhancement work. So welcome panelists. Before we get started, Ants, do you want to introduce yourself before we head to Hemaima?
Kia ora everyone, ko Ants taku ingoa, ko Wanganui te awa, ko Ruapehu te maunga, ko Aotea te waka, ko Parakino te marae, ko Atihanuia Paparangi te iwi. Welcome everyone, really excited for this discussion tonight and looking forward to lots of questions, and we'll see you at the end of this. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Ants. So tonight I want to introduce Hemaima. So Hemaima will be giving us a presentation on the Mauri Ora Window, the art of breathing life into others' experiences. Hemaima will introduce a toolkit of triggers and reminders that are essential for developing effective relationships with patients and whānau, so inequitable differences are overcome and that the patient with their surrounding support network can navigate their health journey towards well-being. Hemaima gave this great presentation at the World Health and Nursing Conference that was held in Rome. It was a shame she couldn't attend in person, but she held this virtually a couple of months ago. So we are so honoured to be able to listen in tonight and hear Hemaima's presentation. So Hemaima, I'll let you introduce yourself and share your slides.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koe Jess and Ants, and tēnā koutou katoa. Ko no taituke rawa hau, ko hekurangi te maunga, ko ngā toki mata whaorua te waka, ko Ngāti Hine te iwi, ko Ngāti Hine me Ngāti Kahu, oku iwi katoa me ki te taha o tōku pāpā, ki te taha o tōku māma, ko Ngāti Kere, me Ngāti Pihere, me Ngaitahu, me Rangitāne, oku iwi katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Hemaima Reihana-Tait tōku ingoa, and as Jess mentioned, I'm one of three actually nurse directors that work for Mahi Tahi Hauora here in Whangarei and across Northland. So we have an office in Kirikiri and Kaitaia. So tēnā koutou. And I guess I'm away now, am I?
Wow, take it away.
Okay. So it is a privilege to be able to give this presentation to you this evening. I want to give a little bit of a context to this kōrero. At the time that we put in an abstract to deliver this kōrero, it was the beginning of COVID, and so we recognised not just in Italy but across the world, and even for us in New Zealand, we have had a lot to be grateful for, and this particular opportunity has given rise to how do we teach things when we are in this environment like we are this evening. And so I'm hoping that the slides and the stories and the messages that I bring to you tonight might help to be thought-provoking in the way that you work in your general practice or in whatever other clinical settings you may find yourselves. So ngā mihi, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā raurangatirama, e ngā haue whā. I greet you once and twice and to you again. So from our ancestors here in Taitokero to yours, from our people to yours, from our tamariki to yours, we greet you and look forward to having this conversation. So, ko Hemaima Reihana toku ingoa. Let's see if we can make the slide change. It's with great pleasure that I bring you a toolkit of principles and practice, as Jess has expressed earlier in the opening. And we call this the Mauri Ora Window. This presentation responds to the importance of cultural competency in nursing to address the inequitable health outcomes for Indigenous Māori in New Zealand through the application of a friendly, easy to apply tool, the Mauri Ora Window. And this is to trigger routine best practice engagement skills. Health equity is defined as differences in health outcomes that are unnecessary, avoidable, unfair, and unjust. A key driver of health inequities is differences in the quality of healthcare, which begins at the point of engagement. I love this picture. It's by my famous cousin, Teresa Reihana, if any of you know her artwork. And so I use it today to bring some cultural content into the story that I bring this evening. So this ancient ancestral story of mankind, of breathing life into man, was passed on to me and tells the creation of humans, which was fashioned from the dust of the earth, formed and shaped. Then the Creator breathed into the form of humans, to which they took in the breath of life and sneezed. Ti hei wā Mauri Ora. This is the expression that came from my ancestors and marks the moment that breath came into humans. And now from then till present day, we greet each other with Mauri Ora, life to you. I want to introduce you to Tamati Kruger, who is a well-known kaumātua from Tūhoi, and he says that Mauri Ora, this expression that we say, that we call, is to feel the thrill of being alive. So we may hongi one another when we greet. Our hongi, our pressing of noses and bringing our foreheads together to touch, is a moment where we can breathe one breath together and have a single thought. But he says it is the feeling, the rapture of life and feeling the thrill of being alive. I love this picture, and I just tell you a little story. The little girl was 2-year-old Mokapuna, and she's 4 now. But very quickly, to express the thrill of being alive, when she was 2, having her second birthday, we put a birthday cake on the table, we lit candles, we sang her a song, and we had great expectations that she would blow out the candles, but she didn't. So we realized that she needed a bit of help. We blew the candles out for her and started the process again. We light the candles, we sing the song, then we wait for her to blow out the candles. And she just stared. So we blew out the candles and we tried it a 3rd time. And this time, of course, with a bit more encouragement, we were successful. We lit the candles, we sang the song, and then we waited. And she understood finally that we were all paying attention to her, and she blew out the candles. I suggest I give you that little story because if you think about a moment where you felt the thrill of being alive and that everybody's focus was on you, I suggest such an experience like the birthday might be one occasion that you can remember quite easily. I tell that to you because The Mauri Ora Window is an opportunity to bring life into a space for other people. Oh, gone backwards. So Mason Jury, we all know Te Whare Tapawha, and we all understand that the construct of the house is to give us the picture and the idea that the four walls of the house, if they are all present, then the house is strong. So we name those walls, those dimensions, those perspectives, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical being. And he describes Mauri Ora as a state of flourishing, the opposite of which is Mauri Noho, or languishing. And I love the words that he provides to help us think about or define how we might measure what is happening, the level of flourishing or languishing, such as an enlightened spirit as opposed to a loss of hope, or a clear and alert mind as opposed to a clouded mind. So these might be some words that you might want to tuck up your sleeve and use at another time when you are trying to call upon some language, a way of articulating what is happening when you observe flourishing in any one of those dimensions. So Mauri Ora is to breathe life. If you could make a difference in a 20-minute encounter with a patient, that would bring them back to you, build a strong platform of trust, give them the confidence that what matters to them is significantly important to you, and then give them the power to make decisions and take responsibility, then I'm sure you would be delighted about the access to a tool that would bring you these results. As you approach an encounter with a patient, consider your role as a nurse to make the experience buoyant and bright, breathing hope and compassion into their experience. The patient themselves presents to you, brings with them and presents to you a task, but they are not a task to be completed. The people who come to you may cross rivers of challenge to reach your service. How you respond and breathe life into their experience may make all the difference to lifting and sustaining them to survive their brief encounter with you and go much further managing their journey. Mauri Ora is a key concept in Te Ao Māori, or the Māori worldview, describing a state of flourishing where one could experience the thrill of being alive. Such a state fortifies the foundation for engagement between a nurse and a patient, fostering trust and confidence and subsequent individual investment in well-being and self-management. It is aspirational to consider what optimism and growth can occur in an atmosphere where the thrill of being alive is cultivated. I just give you a little, some statistics and data, some brief data of our demographic in Northland, and this is our total population, and you can see 35% of that total represents Māori or Indigenous people of Northland. In this slide, you can see that there on the left-hand graph, you can see there is a gap between what life expectancy between people living in Northland and those living in New Zealand. These stats have changed over the last 10, 15 years, and we are having a much different experience with the gap becoming much smaller. But you can see that for New Zealand Māori and Northland Māori, there is also a gap. And so there is an inequitable health difference experienced because of the determinants of health that people experience in our Northland environment. These slides are they are quite current, and they do represent some of the challenges that we are affected by in Northland. The health context shows that more than 1/3 of the population in Northland live in high areas of deprivation where distance from services of health, education, employment, trade services, etc. are difficult to access. Rates of illness and mortality for Māori are higher than non-Māori. Conditions causing death include stroke, ischemic heart disease, lung disease, and those other things that you saw popping up in the previous screen. We acknowledge that Indigenous populations globally expound similarly increased rates of mortality, morbidity, and also disability. Whilst Māori experience higher rates of illness, studies show that they access primary healthcare less, have less tests and investigations ordered with less follow-up than non-Māori. Māori avoid seeking healthcare or present late in their disease process. They miss vital cues to changing health conditions. They are shy or unable to articulate their health and needs clearly, or they may be embarrassed about their poor health circumstance. These outcomes provide the clues, rationale, and the drivers for the need for transformational health change. We were privileged to have, as a member of our health team at Northland DHB over a year ago now, Dr. Juliet Rumble-Smith, who now sits with the Ministry of Health, and she expressed and supported that 3 different ways in which we can address equity. So the first is through addressing systems, and we know how difficult that is because systems can be quite large and progress through the system change can be slow. Secondly, the patient or individual themselves can be a key determinant in the way in which health outcomes are experienced. They can decide, they can be empowered or not, they can have resources or not, but these situations actually demonstrate or show how the patient can participate in their own well-being. The third thing is the area where Dr. Juliet Rumble-Smith says that we have the most power to make a difference, which is in the patient-provider interaction. I want to introduce you to the Northland nursing model of care, and we called it Te Hononga. In the background, you will see the potama, which is the stairway to heaven, or introduces the idea that step by step we can make change and progress and be lifted up in our journey wherever we are going. At the bottom step, we talk about whanaungatanga, and what I expect that you can all appreciate is that in your clinical training, therapeutic rapport and therapeutic engagement is not unusual to you. The word that we might use in the world of Māori is whanaungatanga. The word that we might use to describe what the impact or outcome of whanaungatanga is to connect. And we are connecting people, places, and processes. The second step is then to provide a competent clinical intervention or an action. Now, we've attached a kupu Māori, hauora, which means well-being. Well-being or hauora is not interpreted as action, but we all know that if we provide a clinical intervention, that hauora or well-being will be the outcome. The third aspect or third step in this Te Hononga, which is all about connection, is to share. When we share information and resources and prepare the patient to share their experience with their family members and create a little network of support, then we are fulfilling this third step. And the kupu Māori we have attached to that is whānau ora. Now, whānau ora is whānau well-being, family well-being, and that is not the definition of share, but if we share, whānau ora will be the outcome. We also expect that as services, share the right information, create referrals, and support individuals in their health journey, that they will be able to get the specialist support that they need in a timely way. So we encourage these 3 things: connect, action, share, or whanaungatanga, hauora, and whānau ora as the outcome for bringing these things together. So in a picture, Te Hononga is what Northland is the Northland nursing model of care, or it's a practice implementation tool which helps to trigger in our minds when we are working with people. Don't forget to connect. Don't forget to provide a competent clinical intervention, we never forget that because we are so busy. That's our mahi, that's what we do. But also then to prepare people with the right information so that they can share their experience with family members and those that care about them. So now I want to shift into, that is the background context. The Mauri Ora window sits inside of all of these 3 steps and provides us with some trigger practices which help us to deepen our relationship with the whānau. So ask, build and check are the 3 health literacy steps which also help to deepen our practice. So ask what people know, build on what they know, and check what they know. These 3 things are what I encourage you to do at each step as I present the Mauri Ora window. The Meihana model, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I present this to you just as an opportunity to see how kaupapa Māori engagement can follow these basic steps. We have an introduction, we make a connection with whakawhanaungatanga, and then we take some time to provide support, that's the kaupapa, and address issues, answer questions, provide opportunities for developing new skills and helping patients to lead their own health journey. And then we have a portion of our engagement is spent on closing the session and checking on what they might know now and what they will do next. So this helps us to link our clinical process to a cultural process. Hidden in plain sight. I'm going to turn to my notes. Hidden in plain sight, there is the opportunity to shape our engagement skills and to breathe life into the patient experience. What we have learnt that for Māori there is really an obvious thing to do that we can do, but nurses or clinicians don't necessarily do it. This is to see every encounter as a Mauri Ora encounter. It is an opportunity to breathe life into the patient. It is an opportunity to bring into harmony a suite of skills that operate simultaneously in a nurse who is finely attuned and aware of the role that they play in lifting and sustaining the patient to a position of power and self-efficacy for personal leadership. So I suggest that the steps that I show you now are not necessarily linear. They don't come one after the other, and they may. It takes some skill to bring them all into play at once, but it is possible. This contribution will bring the patient. This way of working will bring the patient back to you voluntarily. They will negotiate with you their challenges and take a stronger lead in their journey. With your trust and respect for their preferences and values, demonstrated in the way that you give yourself to this brief moment, will make a difference and reduce time in other areas and matters of their care. In a clinical environment where there are pressures and limited time, one might forego this opportunity to lift the patient, sacrificing the moment for richness in exchange for the satisfaction to move on to the next task. Feedback from clinicians and nurses, just like ourselves, include having limited time to address multiple complex issues, feeling overwhelmed at times, and limited capability to adapt to new information. Hidden in plain sight is the opportunity to recognise that we as nurses are keepers of a vital ingredient to unleashing the untapped contributions of the patient themselves, simply by connecting with them with the expression of how thrilled you are to see them. The expression of Mauri Ora, therefore, is not a tool to make people feel happy, but rather an opportunity to express that you are thrilled to see them. This subtle difference communicates a sense of value because people need to feel like they are going to have a positive, meaningful, and relevant health experience with you. The encounter with the patient is to not skip over the value of deepening connection, but to really listen, to really focus on them and to breathe life, hope, and encouragement, to lift patients so they are permitted to make decisions that advance their progress to positive health benefit. Tamara Jones is an African-American family doctor. And she suggests that there are differences in the social determinants of health for everyone. There are differences in access to services for everyone. And there are also, even when you get through the social determinants, you finally arrive at services, there will be differences in the quality of health care because we all deliver health care differently. So just a little review. I'm sure you've all seen this picture or a version of equality and equity. I love this one, and you will have your favorites. So you can see that equality means that everybody gets the same resource, but at the top, we don't all get the same health benefit. We're unable to reach that or access it. But equity will show that we can all have that same outcome, but we will need to provide more resources for those who need it. So I love this definition by Aristotle, who, we're talking a couple of thousand years perhaps. I better do my research about how old he might be right now. But equals must be treated equally and unequals unequally according to their relative inequality. We'll just check that. So here we have equals. They can both equally receive the outcome. But unequals, these two, need unequal resourcing. This is an important conversation because in equity, you will find yourself being challenged by others who may disagree with why you may be adjusting yourself or your practice kaupapa to fit the needs of your patients. So the response to that is, well, unequals need unequal treatment so that we can all have an equal outcome. So that's a part of the conversation that is worth practicing and delivering at a time when you may need it. So every person who enters your space and seeks your care and attention, you are being presented a window of opportunity or a chance or moment to make a difference, and we encourage you to take it. And here are the 7 things that we have put into the Mauri Ora window, and I'm going to go through them individually. So the first thing, as we have suggested in the beginning, is to connect really strongly with people. And I might utilize might give you the encouragement to think about what is authentic to you and respectful to them. So if you are of a different culture, a different age, perhaps a different ethnic culture, don't let that be a barrier. Try to correct pronunciation of their name. When that is difficult, elicit their support to help you get that right. Demonstrate that you are interested in them. Firmness in a handshake matters. Hongi, not being afraid to hongi, if that seems to be the thing that might make a difference in the way that you connect. Check out what people understand, why they're there, and how you might participate with them in resolving their questions. Create a specific space for the right processes to occur. This is less about time and more about the quality use of time, putting people above the tasks that we have in our mind. Secondly, here's our birthday surprise. Every time somebody walks into your space, express to them how thrilled you are to see them. Show them how happy you are. And it is important to note that people also come with their own biases. They come feeling guarded, protective, and their lived experience of being poorly treated in the health system, or not, may put them in a different starting place with you. But your response can change this view. And I suggest a warm smile, a handshake, a different way to touch them can make all the difference. So it's really important for us to reflect on our practice, and I think nurses and clinical clinicians have been taught well in the art of clinical reflection, and it can be our best friend. Many clinicians are unaware of problems, and so this is not, so we do need to maintain our vigilance in detecting our own and other people's biases. But as we speak a lot about unconscious bias, how do you know you have one? How do you know you have an unconscious bias if it's unconscious? So I'd like to suggest that an unconscious bias is manifested in our little irritations, our impatience, and our blind spots. We can be more aware when we experience things that we don't like, and our body, it will be demonstrated more quickly in our body language. We may not like a smell, we may make a funny face, turn our back to people, walk away. Unbeknown to us, we may, or without thinking too much, we may talk to people disrespectfully. But there are all kinds of examples that help us to know that help us to recognize when we are behaving unkindly. And I'll just put that picture back up there. So our unconscious bias is experienced by the patient, by the way that we touch them, the way that we walk around them, the tone of our voice, the movements of our own body language movements, and our language helps them to know whether or not they are accepted in your care. I just put this slide here just as a reminder that clinical competency is the science of our work. Every one of us may know how to do a head-to-toe assessment, a simple blood pressure, have a follow through on a basic clinical process. We follow those processes with some level of exactness. But we will perform differently, and I would suggest that our cultural competency, the way that we touch, the tone of our voice, our style and our approach, all of these things represent and evidence our cultural competency. It is the art of our work. Many of you will have had the experience of someone coming into a practice or into your space and saying, "Oh, is that nice nurse, the one that was on yesterday? Is she here again today? Or the last time I came?" And they'll describe a person that they engaged with and make a subtle request to have their care again. And why is that? Because they like the art. They like the way in which that person artfully goes about their work. Culture matters. Culture provides the context of what is important to the patient. Cultural competence is everyone's responsibility, not just a brown person or someone who may fit the cultural context of the person. All around the world, nurses will respect the same protocols, as I have said, and that's the science of our work. But every one of us will add our own personal flair. We all seem to be hoping for cultural expertise. The challenge for nurses around cultural competency is to recognise that every day we can gain a little more cultural knowledge and extend ourselves to understanding more of their worldview and lived experience, and to know a little more about people, but not necessarily to be like them. And I think that that's a really important point, is that all of our cultural knowledge and workshopping and learning is not so that we can be like them, but it is so that we can be more authentic in our approach and respectful to the way in which they would like their healthcare delivered. Culture is all about the craft of your work. It is the style, the approach, the softness, the quiet mindfulness, and your willingness to respond in a way that assists transformation. Step 4 in the Mauri Ora window is clinical action, and it is for us. This is something that we just do naturally because we are qualified in this particular way, which is to be responsive to the person and to deliver the clinical intervention that they have come for. But our goal is to not only achieve that clinical task, but to be mindful of the person in the place where you do your work and keeping processes alive that maintain connection. And fourthly, in this, the fourth P is to not rush, use less words, rely on your touch and pace to connect with people better. We seem to chatter, over talk, or overwhelm people with too many words. Let's see if we can make a difference in the way that we express ourselves in our body language. So at the very beginning, we talk about being connected. I put this little step in here about staying connected because we fall in and out of connection during our contact with people. Try again and again and again to stay in relationship and recognize when things change and when you fall out with the person, and think about what you need to do to get back into connection with them. We want to be able to shift the starting point of services so that people have, and we're talking about heart space, to bring people closer to you so they don't have to work so hard to be understood. So consider how you can shift the power from you as the dominant, stronger person delivering care to making them the decision maker, in charge, the leader, and the driver of their own destiny. This step is the share step. Inform patients, assist information sharing so that you can strengthen family support. And then secondly, progress and share referrals with other services for timely and effective care. This is an easy step, but we don't do it. We are inclined to hurry through our clinical intervention and then say goodbye and have expectations that patients will take care of the information part themselves. But I suggest that a good part of our closing off in our relationship is to make sure that they have understood. This is the check step. Check what they know, check what they heard, check what they are going to do next. Our last step is to evaluate the encounter and to learn from it. So this is to support our critical reflection skills. Scott Miller's outcome rating scale is a good way to, is a good tool. It is a good little checklist that we tuck away into our thinking. I have noted that we are inclined to wait for a client satisfaction survey to be told how well we are doing. But I want to suggest that the more immediate that we can get in our change, the more aware that we can be in understanding what people need, the better our service delivery will be. So if we can learn these questions, and they are oriented around three aspects of our encounter. Firstly, around our relationship. Did the patient feel understood, respected, and accepted by you? And this can be in a survey that you give to them, but I suggest that these questions could be shaped so you could ask them in a way to the patient directly, or at least evaluate for yourself. How well did you do? My relationship was good, between 1 to 5. I did not feel understood, or I did feel understood, or I did understand them, or I did not understand them. Secondly, goals and profit. Work on, did you talk about or work on the things that were important to the person? And thirdly, could we measure, was my approach and method of working with this person a good fit for them? And lastly, you could ask yourself, was there anything missing in the consult? So cultural competence is the artful, responsive way to work with the whānau. The determination of quality and accuracy in treatment and approach to care is then reliant on the perception and experience of the recipient of the services rather than the nurse as the deliverer. It takes vulnerability and courage, and this is the quality that we are espousing and encouraging ourselves to develop. As we close the loop on our learning experience, we lift our skills, sharpen and refine our cultural competency to see things in others and ourselves that we may not have recognised before, and then take responsibility for improvement and change. So here is the wrap up. These are the 7 things that we espouse in the Mauri Ora window. Make every encounter a Mauri Ora experience. So wherever you are in the world, in the country, we hope you've felt something about the Mauri Ora window. Ti hei wā Mauri Ora, the expression of life to you. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Hemaima, and thank you. That was such a fantastic presentation and very thought-provoking. I just want to remind everyone on the webinar that we've got a Q&A function, so please send your questions or comments through to Hemaima and Ants, and we will answer them as we go through. We have had one through. Yes, we will send out the presentation and the recording of the webinar, so you've already had requests, Hemaima, for your presentation. So obviously we're really appreciating your knowledge and sharing your kite. I think what resonated for me is really, we recognise and understand our primary care clinicians are time poor, but cultural competency isn't about, about time. It's actually about the quality use of time. I thought that really resonated with me, and the little things like touch and pace and your approach. So thank you. I'm just going to ask Ants if she's got some reflection on Hemaima's presentation. In your day-to-day work, Ants, how do you think that model would fit, or do you use it already?
I just want to say kia ora, Hemaima, for that. What I think resonates for me is connection and whakawhanaungatanga, which I think a lot of our clinicians do on a daily basis, and it does come down to our time poor and restraints to time, and it's about making that time and making that connection. And I feel really blessed where we work, where all our staff and our clinicians have really good connections with our whānau and our patients, and we do a lot around making more availability time for our nursing staff, especially seeing whānau. So we don't stick. We're very flexible and can be flexible in our hours and time. And I think recognizing in your workplace too with, a lot of us work with templates, and a lot of us are on 15 minutes and half an hour appointments. And for our team, we're really good at going, oh, hey, Nikki's been in with that whānau for 40 minutes and she's running a little bit behind, and she obviously needs the time and the whānau need the time. So other nurses will jump in and take over and help out, or we all kind of know cues where we need to kind of step in and step up and know that sometimes, things, we run late or things happen in our day, and we work together on our side of the table to make things happen for patients. We also recognise that a lot of stuff is that we do our immunisations. So for Naino Medical Centre, we don't just do vaccinations in our practice. We actually will go out and do it in the home, in the whare, and we recognise that people just can't come down to the centre. So we have a lot of opportunities to do opportunistic consultations, I guess, with when we need to, and we have the flexibility of being able to do that. So we have a lot of our templates where we have float nurses that if something happens on the day, they're ready to go and they can go, or doesn't happen, but the availability is there. So yeah, I think there are so many things to do, but connection, whakawhanaungatanga, and acknowledgement, and being happy and a smile, and making people feel welcome and that you actually really do care about why they're here, goes a long way. And it's the same when we go shopping for clothes or in a supermarket and you get a person or customer service where you're like, oh, are they having a bad day? Or you just feel that, you can feel it. And it makes you not want to stay there, or you don't want to engage with that person. So it's about recognizing your own stress and your time and your practice in your day, and not falling it onto the patients or onto the whānau. That's really important. And it's very easy for us to do that. And we have to remind ourselves that what's happening in our day, it can't reflect on who's sitting in front of us.
Ka pai.
Good answer. The other part that really interested me was the reflection piece, Hemaima. Just wondering, either both of you, are you setting aside that time for teams to do that piece of work? How is it kind of built in again into the kind of day-to-day practice for your staff?
Yeah, I think the critical reflection is really important. Questions I get all the time is, how do you know? We've sent staff away to do cultural competency training. They come back and nothing seems to change. So people might have learned a piece of information, a bit of knowledge, a bit of skills, but then come back and may not know how to implement the change. So I suggest that, around the tea table, lunch table, morning tea, whatever, is an opportunity for you to strengthen your relationships with your team members, because actually sometimes talking about these behavior change, because it's thinking change, it's heart change, it's talking about things you observe. And I think we don't necessarily talk about them because for fear of some rejection or judgment or not getting it right. But what I say is, keep a soft heart. That's why Mauri Ora is really important, because if we are breathing life into practice, we will be compassionate in the way that we hear, and we will be compassionate and kind in the way that we respond. And if this is all about learning, teams actually have to get confident in the way that they express their experience with each other. And out of it, you'll start to hear, I worked with somebody this morning. This didn't, I got a sense that I didn't do this very well, whatever that is. And have an opportunity to talk to your team about it and see how other people cope or manage or respond. But if breathing life and sustaining and uplifting is the goal, then we will behave differently as we approach the answers to those questions, as we respond. And I just think for a long time we have been responsive to tick lists, tasks. This is a different type of response. It requires, that's why I say, do what is most authentic to you and what is respectful to others. Because it isn't, equity is not treating everybody the same. And so if you are different, and we are different to everyone who comes into our influence, we are different. And if we recognize that there is a difference, then we will not, we will value people really differently. We will engage them in a way that wants to empower them to lead their own journey. We will listen to them, and we will be humble in our approach. And I think it's those virtues that may be missing in our cultural approach. So that's not about being brown, that's about being human. And I think everybody recognises that too. But for Māori, there is a certain way, and to learn the way, if you are not Māori, is not something you can just learn off a checklist, just by doing what we run on a checklist, because you've got to feel your way, make changes. And I know many, many people of different ethnic cultures who work really well with Māori.
And do you have a thought on the reflection piece?
I think it's fantastic. I think that as clinicians in our day-to-day mahi, we actually don't do that enough. And I think there are probably a lot of isolated clinicians, and I think there are some places where you're just set up where you're in a room by yourself all day and you don't get to see the rest of your team members. Again, we're lucky we have a big open space where all our nurses are together, so they get to talk a lot, and there's a lot of chatting. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's great to see nurses talking. I think it's sometimes people think that nurses aren't doing anything and they're just chatting, but actually the chat that I hear a lot is around the interactions that they've had with their patients and clients and whānau. So I feel that actually that's a really good tool, and I feel like if you are in an isolated area or you don't have a big team, that perhaps getting on some virtual peer reviews with other people and having a roundup once a week is something that we need to start doing more.
Great. Yeah, good idea, Ans. So I've just had a question come through. Do you have any advice on how we engage with patients who are reluctant to seek help? Hemaima, do you want to?
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that goes back to goal setting, or to establishing what is important to the patient. So definitely we hear stories about patients coming in and responding to needing to have their regular diabetes annual review or having a health check, but they have other things are really take much higher priority, like their housing or a job or getting to MSD. All of those things may take precedence over over the moment that you have with them. And we sort of think that social determinants occupy 80% of our life concern, and health occupies 20% of that whole. So it isn't surprising that when people come to us, that their concerns are sitting with 80% of their life issues. And if you want 100% attention, and out of the last 20% that's left, we might be kidding ourselves. So we just have to be really realistic and check in with the patient about what's important. And then once you understand that, then you've begun to enlist their cooperation, if you like, in a plan that you can foresee. If we pay more attention to some health goals, like some self-management goals, some weight goals, some getting you feeling better about yourself, overcoming some depression, all of those things can happen when you take the pressure off the other determinants of health that are bearing down on their thinking. So that's one. That's one way. What do you think, Ants? No,
I think they're great. I think a lot of the time too, I think we clinicians, we feel pressured that we have to be that one person for that patient, and actually, sometimes we're just not, and we are not going to be the one that is just going to have that connection. So we have to figure out, okay, so if I'm not going to be the one, who can I refer? Who can I get the engagement going with? So on my nursing team, I have quite a broad a range of different nurse ethnicities, and so I'm lucky. So we actually have a Samoan and a Tongan nurse, and I'll be like, if I can't engage, I'll be like, hey, do you think you can get on the phone and see what's going on? Or I might think that actually their doctor has a better engagement, so I will go down to their doctor and I'm like, can you just give them a ring, because I feel like they're not wanting to engage or not wanting to, I think maybe it just will be a bit more pull with the doctor, or I will refer out to services. I think get to know your community, get to know the services around you, get to know the services that are available to help different ethnic groups, and because some may need translation, some need a door-to-door knock, some need to make a connection more than once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, whatever it takes. So I think it's really important to know your services that can help, and if it's not that their health is a priority and they've got other stuff going on, where can you help and who can you get to intervene and help them?
Perfect, thank you.
So probably we've got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Working with a number of general practices, a lot of the time, there's comments, we don't have many Māori patients, in our practice. so this doesn't, you know, relate to us. What's your response in there with that?
I think you will find, and it is expressed to me a lot, that you don't have to be Māori to be experiencing an inequitable health outcome. There are many non-Māori who also experience inequity, inequitable inequality. So we just have to be on our toes, sharpening our relationship skills with everyone. By the time somebody who is Māori who comes to you is so well practiced that nobody misses out. And I think, you know, one of the things we say is that if we do things for Māori in a right way, everyone, you know, everyone benefits. So that might be a good way to approach that. But just, yeah, keep our eyes peeled for all sorts of inequity and use every relationship you have to strengthen your own approach and your character, your professional character.
Yes, I think the Mauri Ora Window toolkit can be used right across the board. I think it's a great tool. And I know, you know, again, based on the feedback that we've got coming through, is that many practices want to show this and use this with their team. So I think it's going to be really helpful in people's day-to-day work. So yeah, thank you. Does anyone, Hemaima or Ants, have you got any kind of final comments before we close off?
I just wanted to offer that the presentation, the slides, I will send them to who? To Jess or?
Yeah, to the Healthcare and Collaborative, and we'll share out.
So I won't, I'm not going to put I'm not going to put it into PDF or anything. So that means that my notes for the slides are all attached. I know that might be a little bit unusual for people, but I think it's useful for people to be able to take out of that piece of work what you want, just so long as you acknowledge where that's from, and you'll be sweet. And then,
that's very kind. Okay, so we'll close off now. I just one slide that we'll share just so people know where to access the Healthcare Home Collaborative. So we will put this webinar up as well as the slides on our website. I'll just share that slide. One moment. So there we go. It will be all up and available on our website if you can give us 24 hours. And I'll just ask Hemaima to close us with a karakia.
He karakia whakamutunga. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou āriki o ihu karaiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, 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 āmene.
Āmene.
Thanks, Hemaima.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We'll leave you. Haere rā.